Hello, everyone. I hope everybody has had a good Tuesday. I know for some people it's going to be Tuesday afternoon, and for others it'll be Tuesday evening, and for some of you it may even be further in the future if you're on a different part of the world. But thank you all for being here. There are a couple of disclaimers I kind of want to talk about before we get into talking about answering questions, things like that. So first things first, anybody that we mention, don't send any harassment or hate their way. Everything that I talk about is my opinion from my experiences, my knowledge. Don't take it as fact. Be sure to always do your own research when coming to your own conclusions. Everybody is welcome, but please be respectful. Don't be mean to anybody. Don't leave any outwardly hateful comments. I'm hoping that this goes well, but please just be respectful. So with that being said, for anybody who's new here or just clicking on this because of the title, just so people have an understanding if you haven't been here before, my name is Amanda. I have personal experience from being in the foster care system. I was in the system for 10 years of my life. I'm not going to go into that story. There's a playlist on my channel if you want to know my experience. But I also have professional experience in the state of Florida. I'm no longer working. I haven't worked for a couple of years, but I did work as a child protective investigator in the state of Florida for about 3.5 years. So when I'm talking about CPS and like answering questions and answering anything that is a hypothetical question or anything like that, please bear in mind that is from my experience. Different states operate differently. So just because I say this is how it worked when I was working does not mean that that's still in existence anymore. It does not mean that that state, whatever state we may be referring to, operates the same as Florida does. So please bear that in mind. Again, these are all just my opinions from my personal experience and professional experience. So take that what you will with it. I'm not insinuating anything I say is actually fact. Don't just take what I say and run with it. And just be respectful, because talking about CPS can be a very touchy subject for a lot of people, and I understand that. I've been debating bringing this conversation back to my channel, not just because I know people want me to talk about what's going on with Katie Joy, but because it's been an ongoing, repetitive scene that I have noticed the last couple of weeks, if not months, of mentions of CPS, people not really knowing how CPS operates, and almost at some point, some creators and other people have kind of spread some misinformation. So it's just I'm taking it upon myself, so to speak, to help answer any questions that people may have about how the system operates, about how things may be handled in certain situations, just to help break the stigma and allow people to have an open, educated conversation about this. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and say hello to those who have joined us, and then we can start talking about the different things. Some people have submitted questions, so I'm probably going to start there, and then we can continue the conversation, and I'll be checking on the chat. So if you guys have any questions, or if I say anything that sparks a question, please feel free to leave it. There's going to be no judgment, but also I do not want any trolling or nastiness. So the mods are aware, and if not, I'm telling them now. If anybody's trolling, just time them out. I'm not dealing with that. This is supposed to be a productive conversation. And if you can't do so respectfully, then I don't want you to be a part of the conversation. So without further ado, thank you all for being here. Hey, Christophan. Hey, Michelle. Hey, Blue. Hey, Cheryl. Hey, Sue M. Hey, Amber. Hey, Dina. Hey, Beauty Demon. Hey, Kristen. Hey, Sally. Mermaid in the ICU. Hopefully I said your name correctly. Hello. Hey, Miss Cassandra. Hey, Penny Lane. Hey, April. Hey, Jamie. It's good to see everybody here. Hey, Stina. So at this point, I'm going to stop welcoming everybody. Please understand if you join, I'm not trying to make you feel that you're not included. You definitely are. I am going to be reading the chat, but I'm not going to every time stop and say hi to people joining. But if you have any questions or provide any insight, I may read your comment. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get into some of these questions. Now, I ran 2 different threads for people to leave questions. I ran one on Twitter and I ran one on my community tab. So I'm going to be answering those questions. And if anything is super, super specific, I may generalize it. So if you've left a question and I generalize it, it's no shade towards you or anything like that. Specifics in certain situations don't need to be talked about. So let's see here. So let me go to my, I just took screenshots of it all. So let me go to my photos and pull some of these questions up. Mods, I don't think we're going to get overwhelmed in the chat, but if we do, just let me know and I'll slow the chat down. All right, so someone on Twitter left quite a few messages, or questions, so I'm going to answer them in order. The first one says, if an agency or police department has your name as a public figure getting false reports, will they come after a call is received? From my experience, yes. If it rises to the level that, at least for CPS, if it rises to a level, even if you're a public figure, if it rises to a level for any amount of concern and it gets screened in for an investigation, you're going to get that visit. As far as law enforcement, I don't know. I would assume that they don't have the ability to decline welfare checks or concerns because you don't know. They're not going to, in my opinion, and this is not a professional opinion, this is like me just thinking critically. In my opinion, it wouldn't do well for any kind of agency that gets a call to not respond to the call. That leaves them liable if something actually is going on and they don't go out to it. So I don't necessarily know 100%, but I would not think that because someone's a public figure, they're not going to get investigations or get visits. The second question is, if a call is placed in the evening or overnight about physical abuse, will they wait until the next morning to make the visit? It depends. It depends on the severity of the allegations. And you have to keep in mind, every time a report is screened in on CPS's end, it goes through a criteria check when you are talking or submitting the report online. So if it rises to a criteria where they think that an immediate response is needed because the child or children are in imminent danger, yes, they will respond. I worked some days in the county that I worked in, we were ran by the state, but you worked in a specific county. The county I worked in, if you were on call on a Saturday or a Sunday, you were working all of the reports coming in that day. And when it came to like normal business hours, 8 to 5, you would only take the imminent reports that would come in. And you really rarely got the choice. You could always staff it with your supervisor. And if you had supporting evidence that it wasn't an imminent issue, you could potentially put it off to the next day. But it was very rare that you were able to what we call downgrade a case to go out on it the next day. But it does happen. Is the next question from this person, is there ever reports done after a visit from both CPS and police officers who made the call? I'm not sure I understand what that question is asking. So I don't know if they're talking about like additional reports made or additional visits made. With law enforcement, it depends. If they have an active investigation, they're going to have to continue to work that investigation. And if they have to go back out, then they will go back out and collect additional information. For CPS, it's going to depend on the state and their methodology. In Florida, you pretty much had regular contact with your families, and it was statute that you see your kids every 30 days. So if for some reason it was a case that wasn't significant, you didn't really have concerns on, and you have other cases that are more concerning and getting more of your attention, it is likely that a case will reach 30 days and you haven't necessarily laid eyes on the kids again. And you do, by statute, which means by law, you have to go back out and re-see all of your kids every 30 days in Florida. As far as additional reports being made, yes, additional reports can be made anytime. You can have an open investigation, someone else sees concerns, calls the hotline, and it gets added on to the original report. The next question is, if so many false calls are made for one person or family, can't the police take over and charge the person making the false calls? Yes, but it is extremely hard to prove false reporting. You have to be able to prove it's the same person, and you have to be able to prove that they have malicious intent. It's not impossible. I saw it done twice while I worked for 3.5 years, and both times it was families that were dealing with it for a long time. So it is possible. It is just very hard to prove. And yes, law enforcement is the one who would make the charges, even if it's false reporting on CPS's end, like somebody's falsely reporting to CPS. It is law enforcement who will make the charges, clearly, because law enforcement is the agency that upholds the law. The next question, are calls closed right away or investigated? I mean, that depends on the state. You can get a case and work your entire investigation in a very short period of time and close the case out. And it also just depends on the state. Some states do like preliminary investigations where a full-blown investigation isn't launched. Florida does not operate that way, but I do know and have looked into how other states' CPS works, and they have like a preliminary thing where there's enough for a concern, but not enough for an investigation. So they go out and they make contact with the family and talk to everybody about said allegations, make sure everything's okay, and there's not actually an investigation that occurs. So it really is just going to depend on the state. And the last question from this particular person is, if a call is made about a parent, is that parent a maid of the call, questioned, investigated, or kept in the dark while the spouse speaks to CPS instead? Depends on the state again. From my, like when I was investigating and how Florida was operating when I was employed, you have to interview everybody in the household pertaining to the allegations. Now, if you have allegations and you have one parent who is perceived as the perpetrator, that's just the terminology we used. So it's going to be the terminology I use here. If you have one parent that is inflicting the concern, the harm, the allegation, if it is something that rises to a level with law enforcement being necessary, typically that parent is waited to be interviewed until last. Best practice in Florida and how you're taught to run an investigation is to talk to your victim child, the child that's alleged to have been the one receiving any kind of maltreatment. And then you talk to the other children in the house, and then you talk to the non-offending parent, and then you talk to the offending parent. The reason that CPS operates in that manner in most states is that way the parents don't have the ability to coach kids. And that's why I know a lot of people have issues with CPS going to schools and talking to kids while they're in school. The reason that they do that is so kids can't be influenced by their parents. Of course, over summertime and breaks, reports don't stop just because it's summer or there's breaks. So in those instances when the kids are at home and the parents are there, we are trained in a way to like try have conversations with the parents and interview the kids separately. That way there is no influencing occurring. Now with that, if a parent denies you to have access to the child alone, there's a number of things that can be done. It really depends on the severity of the allegations. If you already have concerns in your pre-field investigation has led you to already have some inkling of a concern that something is happening and a parent is combative with you or denying with you, you already kind of have a game plan with your supervisor on how you're going to handle that when you get out there. And if you're met with that, typically you already have a game plan, whether that be to have them meet you at the office where you can have another worker separate the family. You bring another worker with you. That way, again, you can separate the family members and talk to them. Under extreme cases, we can get a judge to sign a court order for us to gain access for a child without the parents being there. And it's a court order, so the parents can't do anything about that. I mean, there's a number of ways to go about interviewing children if the parents aren't going to be cooperative. And typically in most instances, not all, but in most instances, if you're denying CPS access to talk to your kids in a private setting, it's typically going to be because you're trying to hide something. Not always. I have worked cases where parents were just really scared and really nervous because CPS has a bad stigma on it, that they just get scared and they don't want you to, which is understandable. And as a worker, you know that you're going to have that happen from time to time. So some other questions here are my honest question are: one, are all states confidential to CPS, not just state to state? It is state to state. It depends on the state and how they operate. If reporters have anonymity, most states, from what I have seen, all reporters have anonymity, and it is against the law, especially from my knowledge from when I worked in Florida. It is against the law for a worker to disclose who made the call. And you will have parents and families even who will try and suggest that they know who called based off of the allegations. You can't confirm or deny who made the report, even if they guess correctly. And I will tell you, about 80% of the time, their guess is not correct. And as far as, just to answer this aspect of it too, as far as people getting access to investigation reports, no one can gain access to that. It's totally confidential. It's not a public thing because you're dealing with minors and what minors are saying. So it is totally under lock and key. The only way someone can get access to a report is from a parent, or like a parent involved in the investigation. They can get access to their reports, at least in Florida, but it is going to be redacted to protect outside sources, because part of an investigation is to talk to outside sources. And if someone else gets access to that, it's going to be because the parent gave them access to it, not because CPS gave them access to it. Another one from the same person is: two, if CPS knows calls coming in have not been founded in a case, can they say, hey, we're not going to check on the cases, check these cases out? I don't like the verbiage of how that's worded, but essentially when you have a concern, whether it be a family member, a friend, even a stranger, that maybe you see something really, really concerning and you call into your hotline, your child abuse hotline. What those workers are doing is they're gathering all the information from you about the family that they can. One, to identify them. Two, to know what maltreatments are occurring. And three, to know what the allegations are. Because when a report is made, it is just allegations. So it is up to that state and how that CPS operates and their criteria operates to determine if a case is going to be called screen in, which means it goes out into the field and investigation is had. Now, I can tell you from personal experience, this is widely different based off of different states. I had cases where families would flee, and I would call the state that I know they fled to and call in a report there because I had concerns, and they won't screen in a report, even though there's severe concerns. It's just different criteria for different states. It's unfortunate, but it is what it is. Every state has a different criteria. You hate when CPS calls ahead of time to make appointments. Yeah, that's counterproductive in my opinion. We really were not allowed to do that in Florida. It had to be like extenuating circumstances that our supervisors would approve that kind of conversation. So let's see. I'm going to read through because some people left like pretty large paragraphs and some of it isn't questions. If someone from out of county call in without evidence and CPS rush right to the home. So this one can be convoluted. Anyone can call in a report, okay? And I know a lot of these questions now are going to be geared towards a particular creator. And what I will say is people are not probably going to be happy with what I have to say in relation to that whole situation. And I will get into it. Yes, you can call from out of county. You can call from out of state. You can call from any, if you observe or you have witnessed something happening in a child being in an unsafe situation, you can call. It is up to that state if it rises to the criteria for them to screen it in and run an investigation. Now, I know there's a lot of conversations going on about certain things and how things unfold. Okay, so for example, say somebody calls in a report, the family has moved, they once were in a certain county, so it got called in there, but come to find out they lived in the county I worked in, or vice versa, okay? So you get a call and the family doesn't live in your county. The way Florida operated was you would call an investigator in that county, or you would call their screeners, the people who pass the reports out for that county, and you would say, hey, I have a family that has children, they need to be seen, this is my time frame, and they would send out a worker. Now, there are situations where CPS will utilize law enforcement just to lay eyes on the child. So it is possible. Does that mean law enforcement is running the investigation for CPS? No, it could just mean CPS requested that law enforcement go out just to lay eyes on the kid to see how imminent it is. And if there's concerns, then I'm sure a worker would be there within whatever amount of time they can get there. If there aren't concerns, then they may wait to actually do their investigation. So it very much just depends on the scenario, the allegations, the concerns at hand, and what information you have already obtained. So it's possible. It does happen. Again, CPS in different states operate differently. I was talking about this with my members the other day. In Florida, we had 2 timeframes that we worked off of. So cases came in and they were screened in and they were given timeframes. We were either given a 24-hour time frame, which were just everyday cases. And then if it was imminent or when it was screened in, they had severe concerns, it was labeled an immediate and we had to see our kids within 4 hours. And that varies from state to state. Here in Utah, the earliest call time, I think, is like 2 days. So that is something that varies widely depending on the state and how they run. So let's see here. Okay, let's see another question. The rest of that is just feeding off of the initial question. So someone asks they're interested in how long child services has to remove a child. There's not a time limit on it. Most states have statutes for how long your cases are supposed to be open for. In Florida, it is 60 days. It is expected that you have your cases closed within 60 days. Do some cases because you're still collecting information or there's concerns and you're just trying to support whatever it is, because it is not easy to remove kids. Despite what people think, it is not an easy process. So in certain circumstances, your supervisor and other supervisors over them have to approve you leaving the case open. And if they don't approve it, you close out the case and you call in another one so you can work it again. So yeah, there's really no limit. Removals can happen within 24 hours. They can happen within a few weeks. It really depends on what your concern is and how effective you are at gathering the information to support the concern. And you have to be able to prove to a legal team and to a judge that this removal should happen. So it's really not an easy feat to get a removal. Someone else asks some more specific and gruesome details, which I'm not going to say here. What they're interested to know, why in some cases CPS doesn't do a removal when they have seen visible marks on kids. There could be a number of reasons why it may not have met enough for legal to support a removal or for the judge to support a removal. It could be, yeah, marks are on the child, but just because you see marks doesn't necessarily mean that they were inflicted or caused intentionally. I mean, kids get hurt all the time, and it really just depends about what information you gather. If you have a verbal child, and this can be frustrating for workers because you can have a verbal child who has a bruise in a spot that is not likely, their story doesn't match up with with how the mark was inflicted or received. And you know that you have suspicion, but if your verbal child is not going to give you any information and you're not getting any concerning information from anyone else, it is hard to get a legal team and a judge to support that child should be removed from their home. Because the reality is, in most states, the methodology that they work off of is least intrusive. So you try to not remove children from families. And if you do end up with a removal, there are steps that most states take to try and maintain the child in a familiar environment. So I believe that is all of the questions I had received on my threads. So let me go and see. If you guys have any questions, leave them in the chat. I'm going to start skimming the chat. Yeah, see, Suzanne says that in Virginia, it was different, required within 12 hours unless an emergency. So, I mean, different states operate differently, and these kind of statutes and time limits and time frames, they change state to state. They change even within states. They change as lawmakers make the changes. Yeah, I see some people talking about the Summer Wells case. To be honest, I haven't followed that case. I know it is heartbreaking, though. Do reports slow down in the summer or on breaks, though? No, not really. There's not really ever a lull in child abuse and neglect. There's really never a lull in it. What percentage of reports to CPS are false? I mean, like I said, in my whole time, only 2 were not convicted, but were able to go through with going to law enforcement to be able to investigate filing charges for false reporting. Now, are there cases that people make, whether it's vindictively or maliciously, that have no grounds to it? Quite a few. But even in those instances, you will find families that are struggling, and you're able to assist them by offering services in the area. Sometimes there's cases that it's a one-off incident and it's nothing that has happened before. It was out of norm, whether that's due to outside stressors or something like that. Parents are people. Parents make mistakes at times. It doesn't mean that their child is always going to be unsafe in their care. It's hard to explain. So for me to explain it, the easiest that I can is going to be this way, is corporal punishment. Okay. A lot of parents engage in corporal punishment. Whatever your opinions are, that's fine. But as long as it's legal, parents can engage in corporal punishment. So they've always punished their children physically, maybe with a hand, maybe with a belt. And there's never, ever been any kind of concern, mark, anything left behind. But under one instance, a parent who is fulfilling the punishment of physical punishment, they are either frustrated, distracted, really stressed, and they happen to leave a mark. Again, it's going to be based off of all of your information gathered and how severe the mark is and where the mark is at, if there's going to be any substantial grounds for having concerns. If it's a pattern, or when you get to it, there are multiple marks in different stages of healing, yeah, there's going to be a concern, and you're going to go down that form of questioning and digging deeper. But the kind of questions that CPS asks, especially from my experience in working in Florida, it is extremely intrusive. CPS is, at least from, again, how Florida operates and the information you have to gather, it is extremely intrusive. It's intrusive on the family. It's intrusive on the parents, especially the parents, because they're the ones that you're questioning the most. For the kids, it's not as bad. You're pretty much just asking about the allegations and like their daily routine, what it typically looks like for them, how their life typically is, general questions that aren't going to be traumatizing to the child. Even when you have severe allegations, investigators are trained on how to appropriately ask children of these serious issues that don't traumatize them, that don't put them into any more concerning states than what they may already be in, especially when you talk about SA and things like that. It is very hard to appropriately talk about it. That's why we're trained to know how to talk to children of different ages at different developments, how to appropriately question them and it not interfere or seem like we are antagonizing them or forcing them to disclose anything. It is very much like a casual conversation. That's how we're trained to talk to people. Kristen, you bring up a good point. It is not always visible. And if kids are in unsafe situations, they typically will make sure an adult outside of their family is aware, like in instances like that, where they're making drawings or they're writing notes or their behavior drastically changes. There's plenty of ways to identify children being harmed other than just seeing them physically. Hey, not another housewife. Good to see you. Are CPS calls allowed to be anonymous? Yeah, they are. The only people who know who called in the report is the investigator and their supervisor. Even when I would work cases with law enforcement, I would not disclose who the reporter was to them. It does them nothing for their investigation to know who called the report in. They don't need to know who called the report in. So they will conduct their investigations how they need to. And the situations that law enforcement end up a part of an investigation is for severe cases where criminal charges can likely be had. Other times, CPS utilize law enforcement as backup. So I don't know if you guys are aware of this creator. If not, I'm not encouraging you to go watch their content. I'm not encouraging you, if you do know who they are, to harass them. But there's a creator on this platform who recently, her name's Trishalicious, who recently had her child removed from her, and she live streamed the entire thing. And it was shocking. I actually did a live review of that with my members. It was shocking, but at the same time, like, the only reason law enforcement was there was because those workers knew she was probably going to be combative with them. And she was. not like aggressively so, but she was definitely being combative. Why they let that go on for an hour, I have no idea. But it's shocking. It was shocking to me. It was shocking that you would live stream that. That whole thing has me really confused. But law enforcement is utilized more so as assistance than to do anything, because in most states, from what I have researched, I'm not even going to say that. In Florida, we don't have to have law enforcement with us. It is up to us if we feel that we are going to be in an unsafe situation. Do we call them for backup? And they're literally there just to protect us, because as CPIs, we could not have any kind of weapon with us. All we could have, and all you could have in your vehicle, was paper and pen. You couldn't have, even if you had your concealed carry, you couldn't have that in your vehicle when you were working. You couldn't have any kind of taser, mace. You couldn't have any of that. So you're literally out there at your own free will, talking to people who are not always in a stable and safe frame of mind. So the only time law enforcement is ever really used in Florida anyways is at the CPI's discretion. Now, I know here in Utah, they don't do anything without law enforcement. Their entire investigations are ran side by side with law enforcement. So there are states that operate with law enforcement in tow. It really just depends on how that county, how that state, how they run their methodology. It's very much just state by state. So I know that there was a lot of questions on Twitter in relation to Katie Joy. Okay, so I'm just going to get this out of the way. This whole stream is not going to be about her. Let me just say, I'm in no means defending her, but people need a harsh reality check, including her, in my opinion. Like, I don't understand why she thought it was going to bode in her favor to post a picture of a law enforcement officer in her house. Like, I don't understand that. The internet wouldn't know that had even occurred if she didn't let the internet know it had happened. So my criticism to her is, like, don't share that shit. It's your choice if you want to, but when people criticize you and pick it apart, it's because you allowed them to, because you let it be known to the internet that law enforcement was in your house. Now, to the people trying to claim that it's fake, seriously, why would she fake shit like that? I mean, seriously, guys, think about it. Why would she fake it? And if you're going to say for sympathy and for the super chats, if you watched her stream, which I did, she really didn't gain that much sympathy money from it. So it really just, that excuse doesn't make sense to me. I am going to give Katie the benefit of the doubt that, yes, that law enforcement officer was there. Now, what is confusing about how she talks about this situation is she claims that the call was made to a different county in CPS and that law enforcement came out to her house. Again, it is 100% possible. Now, what gets confusing is at certain times she claims that she doesn't know who called, and then she does know. I just think sometimes she talks and she doesn't realize what she's talking about or what information she has already given, and she ends up backtracking, which is why a lot of people don't trust her, because she mixes her information up within the hour stream that was there. So is it possible that, yes, CPS was called and law enforcement followed up on the call just to lay eyes on the child and see the family? Yes. Does that mean law enforcement ran the investigation if CPS is involved? No, not necessarily. But again, it could have been an instance where the out of county didn't know. Maybe the other county that she worked in, they couldn't get a hold of that county and they needed the child to be seen, so they called a welfare check. It could have been a welfare check. It could have been a welfare check done because CPS asked it to be done. But law enforcement does not run CPS investigations. Not even in Minnesota. They don't run investigations. They run criminal investigations. Another thing I'm going to clarify, about CPS and it dealing with Katie in this whole situation is she mentions that there's a case number and people are questioning that. Anytime law enforcement goes out with a CPI or goes out on a welfare check, it is documented. It may not be an investigation number, but you're going to get a case number because officers have to document where they're at, what they're doing, and why they're there. So she likely does have a case number. Does that mean it's an investigation number? No, it could just be an incident report number. But either way, she probably has a number. I get she is hard for people to believe and you constantly want to question her due to her previous behaviors. Listen, I understand that. But at some point, you have to stop being so hypercritical and picking apart everything. I think a lot of this wouldn't happen if Katie would kind of put some boundaries up for herself and not share these kinds of things with her audience. I think she does it, and this is just my opinion, that maybe she does it hoping that it will stop because she's saying, listen, it happened, like quit. But what I don't think she understands is she is giving those people who are doing this, she is giving them the satisfaction that they wanted. They wanted to see her upset. They wanted to see her frustrated. They want to see her put up against a corner. And when she shares this shit online, she is feeding into them 100%. Now, if she wants to do that, fine. Like, she can make whatever choice she can make. But my advice would be to just not give these people who are doing this the benefit of the doubt. Now, if we're, again, taking Katie's word that the reason they were there is because the allegation was she physically abused her son on live stream. Stop it. Everybody needs to take a fucking step back. She has never done anything to her son to cause for concern. Has she yelled at her son? Absolutely. Who hasn't yelled at their children? I mean, honestly, who has not raised their voice at their kids? Him screaming in the background, it does not mean he's being mistreated. I have said this time and again, and I'll say it now because somebody's questioning me on fucking Twitter. I don't think her child is in any way, shape, or form being harmed from what we see online. But when you want to take into account concerns that you see online, you can talk about the channel Daddy05 that existed. He was blatantly filming videos, mistreating his children. Trisha Licious, blatantly kind of neglecting her child while she's live streaming, clearly intoxicated. Okay, that is what it looks like when a parent is mistreating their child. Just because she hollers at him because she doesn't want him seen on camera does not mean she is a bad mom. And again, do I always agree with her parenting style? No, but that doesn't mean she's a bad parent. And that goes to all of these fucking family channels. Like, we only see a snippet of it. Stop running with whatever shit you want to run to cause havoc on somebody's life. Even Katie Joy, stop calling unless you have a legitimate reason to call, because at one point in time, she was, just to clarify what I mean here, if she is on her Twitter having suicidal ideation, if you know her information and why you know it, I don't fucking know, because you shouldn't. But if you do and you feel that you need to have that done, take that upon yourself. Don't go posting about it. Don't go bragging about it. And really, you need to question why you even have her information to call those places in the first place. No matter how much I have criticized Katie and I have called her out on her bullshit, I never have ever known exactly where she lives. Yes, I know she has publicly shared her county, but you want to know what? I don't even know, because it's information I shouldn't know, so I don't care to retain it. You guys need to, the people who engage in this, and I don't mean you guys as my viewers or my supporters or anything like that, I'm just talking about in general, really need to take steps back. Unless you have a very legitimate reason to call any kind of agency on anyone, you shouldn't be. You shouldn't be doing it just to spite them, just because they pissed you off, just because you don't like them, does not give you and should not warrant you digging into them just to hurt them, just to get back at them. It is ridiculous. And I am so sick and tired of seeing it. And it happens through every fucking community. And it's absolutely deplorable. And stop with the fucking hypocrisy about doxing. If you see a dox, you can like somebody and disavow one action they do. That doesn't mean that you don't get to like them anymore, but you can have the decency and the moral high ground to say, listen, you fucked up. I still like you, but you fucked up here. You know what that's called? That's called being an adult. That's having real conversations with people. There's nothing wrong with that. If Xylee doxed somebody and I knew about it, I would sure shit tell her, you fucked up. You shouldn't have done that. And if I had to publicly talk about it, I fucking would, because it's inappropriate. You shouldn't be co-signing any kind of doxing of anyone just because you're mad at them or because you don't like them or because they shaded you somewhere. Like, that's so childish and it is so harmful. Like, seriously, you guys really need to think about the repercussions that can come from doxing. A lot of bad stuff can come from doxing and has in the past. Why have we not learned from that? Why have we not learned from really bad situations happening, from streamers getting swatted? Why have we not learned from that? Why are we allowing that to just not be something that we see and learn from and not repeat time and time again? If you feel that you need to go after somebody that hard, I highly suggest you take a step back and you log off for a little while until you don't feel that rage. And if somebody is raging, like you get raged that much when you see someone or talk about somebody or you see their video pop up, you need to block them and stop giving them that free space in your head. Nobody deserves that. You don't deserve to be miserable, always being mad, thinking about this person and hate watching. You don't deserve that. Just like the person on the receiving end really doesn't deserve you leaving disgusting, vile comments because you don't like them, because your feelings are hurt, or whatever situation it is. So that is my rant. I'm so over this, and I get, because Katie is a polarizing figure. You either love her or you hate her. To be honest, I'm in the middle. She's not that interesting to me. I don't keep up with her anymore. Of course, anytime CPS is brought up with her, people tend to screenshot it, send it to me, ask me about it. And I understand, and like, it doesn't bother me. But if you're a part of the community that really disdains her, and you know, or you are the one who is going out of your way to go real life with her over stuff that is actual lies, you need to log off. And you do end up proving Katie right, that she has all of these people harassing her, which for the longest time, the community that used to be to call her out was not engaging in that kind of behavior. But unfortunately, you guys are proving Katie right, that a lot of people who don't like her are going overboard, are harassing her, are doing all of this stuff. You're proving her right. And I don't think anybody wants her to be proven right about that, because it's really disgusting, and it's disgusting to be aligned with any kind of community that does that. And I understand a good bit of the anti-KJ community does not engage in that nasty behavior. And if you know who it is, I'm sure they would disavow it. But the thing is, we don't know who it is. So we can't shame them or, pull support from them or, kick them out of whatever community, because it's all anonymous. But seriously, like, you do have to start to think about the community that you are in and the community that you're allowing be around you. So we can move on. I think I answered every question in any kind of scenario about Katie and what she has said in relation to the law officer being there and the CPS involvement. If not, if you still have a question, now's going to be your time. Otherwise, like, I'm not addressing this stuff with Katie, because people just want to make everything she says a lie. And I'm sorry, but I don't think she's lying about this. I don't understand why she would lie about this either. And that's when you start to get in your little conspiracy theories, when you're like, oh, she's lying about this to get sympathy or to do a sympathy stream. Okay, she did a stream and yeah, she got some super chats, but it's not like she made bank off of it. So that really does not fit that narrative. It really doesn't. Thank you, Boop. Thank you for the compliment. I appreciate that. You might get... And I really haven't been paying too much attention to the chat. So if you have left a question and I didn't see it, I apologize. I might get hate for this, but KJ lies about so much that you question everything she says. You think it's her own fault. And a lot of people are in that sentiment that because she lies and because she has hurt people, whether she wants to acknowledge the fact that she has offended or hurt people emotionally based off of her reporting on topics, it's the true reality she has, and it makes it hard for people to believe her or trust her. And I get that. But when it comes to something as serious as this, I understand people questioning it. I really do. But at the same point in time, like, we know at this point that this has happened before. And nobody believed her then, probably because she does do this cry wolf stuff. So I understand that. But it was proven that it happened to her before. So why can it not happen to her again? It's very possible it did. I think she would avoid a lot of this conversation happening around her if she wouldn't share so much of that stuff to her audience. And that's not me trying to dictate and say what she shouldn't share. But at some point, she needs to understand she should probably put in a boundary that when it comes to things with her sons and she doesn't want that to be a topic or her parenting to be a topic, she probably shouldn't share when law enforcement is there or when CPS is called, because it does nothing but allow people to have the conversations or assume she's lying, or for people to pick it apart. Do I think that's necessarily fair that it happens to her? No, but I do understand the argument, again, that people have, that she's just hard to trust and hard to take her at her word. I get that. But at some point, I've said this before, and a lot of people didn't like that I said it, but I don't care. She is a human at the end of the day. She is a parent at the end of the day. Like, we need to have some semblance of boundaries of our own and respect for that, and move on from it. Like, what good does it do for people to assume that she's lying or try and Photoshop this cop in a different place because they think it's Photoshopped? Like, it's just, that's going too far. That's being too ridiculous. That's going with too many conspiracy theories. And it does no good to your argument either. It really doesn't. You're not a fan of hers, and I certainly would not call police or CPS the only person you're hurting. Yeah, I don't necessarily agree that the only person that's getting hurt is the child. I don't necessarily agree with that because, again, professionals know how to handle themselves and deal with situations like that and deal with children who have the things going on that her child has going on. So I don't think he's necessarily being harmed in this, but it is a disruption. And she even said in this video, this recent live stream, which is the only reason why I'm mentioning it, you know, she acknowledged that he is autistic. And I do understand with autism, routine and structure are very important, and having strangers and things like that kind of intrude on your daily routine can be very disruptive. So I can identify that it probably is not a comfortable situation for him or their family to be in, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's traumatic or that it's hurting him, if that makes sense. But I do get where you're coming from, that in your efforts to like sock it to Katie, so to speak, you're only really causing an effect. And I'm not saying it's a negative impact, but you're causing some kind of impact on the child who a lot of people claim that they don't want to be a part of. While we're on this, I'm just going to make this public statement here because I don't talk about Katie anymore. If you are somebody who is engaging in the conversation of questioning his health, of questioning his appearance, of making fun of him, if you are that disgusting of an adult that you can have conversations like that on your social media, you really need to really second guess what you're doing, because that is extremely inappropriate behavior. You should not be talking about any child's looks or talking about because their parent is untrustworthy. You shouldn't be putting that on the child publicly. You shouldn't be picking apart any child publicly. You just shouldn't. And it's not just with her son that I see this happen to. Not Another Housewife recently posted a video exposing the anti-mommy vlogger community, and she showed how in this Discord, a lot of these people who engage in that community were doing the same thing to some of these mommy vloggers' children. That is absolutely deplorable. And I would really hope that if you have ever engaged in that, that you can take a second and think about what you're doing. Think about the impact that that could have on whichever child you're talking about, if they ever saw it one day, or if that was being said about your child, or if you don't have children, your nieces, or some kind of child in your family, if you saw that being said or done to a child in your family. Think about it from that aspect before you engage in those kinds of conversations. And if you know people who are engaging in those kind of conversations, you have it's within your right to like still be friends with them, but like have conversations with them, or just not engage in it, because I see it happening. And then I see people who I genuinely like respect commenting in approval. And it's like, why are you approving of that? Is it just because it's Katie's kid that you're approving of that? Because if it was of your own child, you probably would lose your shit, and rightfully so. So it does give Katie the reason to be pissed off when shit like this is happening on the internet around her son, who she really has tried in recent years to keep him off the internet. I know in previous years she has openly discussed him. And that's a moral decision you have to make if you think that it's appropriate to talk about what she has said before. But if she's trying to make the conscious effort to not have him be a part of her online space, as a fellow parent or a fellow aunt, uncle, whatever you may be, you should respect that. Thinking of if that were your child or your family member. I'm just saying. Yeah, I know Janelle Eason is often talked about in relation to CPS and issues like that. I've never really gone down the rabbit hole of Janelle because I don't like her behavior, and I already have a bias of not liking her behavior. So she's one I really haven't gone down and looked and seen or researched rather, the situations that she has had and the involvement she has had with CPS. Exactly, Katie. You bring up Katie Beach, you bring up very good points. I appreciate you sharing that and being vulnerable in my chat. Okay, you have a problem with how blasé she is about him having a meltdown. Her husband is at home. Her husband is caring for him. So he may be being comforted by his father, but we don't see that. Katie knows if he's being supervised by his dad or by someone else, if they still have assistants in their house. So I really don't, it's a parenting choice at that point if she is going to continue to do her job or if she's going to interrupt her job and go care for her son. That really is a parenting choice for her to make. And whether you agree with that or not is your own opinion, and you're welcome to it, but you really have to kind of take that aspect out of it. And really, again, if you're taking a step back and you're looking at the bigger picture, if Katie was going to an office space, or say she had her studio apart from the house and he wasn't even able to be heard, you wouldn't be able to have these judgments of her parenting choice. It is because she is in her house, but he is being cared for. I understand people don't agree with that parenting choice that she makes, but that doesn't mean she's a bad parent, and it doesn't mean the child's in a harmful situation because you don't like the way that she's parenting her son. Yeah, it does. How children are discussed is really disgusting in a multitude of communities. It's not just Katie's son that gets talked about that way. It's a lot of people's children do. And it's really disgusting. I really don't think when people are engaging in that kind of talk when it comes to children, they're not thinking of it from the aspect of if this child ever saw this, or if this was being said about my child or my niece or my nephew. Again, some like myself, I don't have children, but if I saw some of the things being said about these kids, about my nieces, I would lose my absolute shit. I think we need to remember, yeah, exactly. Exactly, Cheryl. Okay, Sabrina, I'm sorry I missed your previous message. It is a point, though, even if that's not what you were intending and I missed the first half, I apologize. I wasn't trying to come at you specifically. I was responding to your comment because I do see that kind of conversation happening a lot. So I apologize if you thought I was coming at you. I was not intending that. I was just giving my opinion about that part of the conversation I saw, because it is something that I do see mentioned quite a bit in relation to how she parents. You feel like moms are judged so much more when it's, wait, I don't know if I'm misreading this. I feel like moms are judged so much more when it's the dads. It's like, oh, they're providing for the family. But when the mom is doing the same thing, they're called horrible mothers. I mean, it is a kind of a societal issue that I think people are starting to try to overcome, is mom shaming. Mom shaming happens a lot. You feel like a lot of reports are made out of malice and not concern, in your opinion. If you're talking about to CPS, that's not really been my experience as a worker, but like I said, they do happen. And they happen frequently, but they don't happen to the extent of that is the majority or even half of the reports that get received. Okay, so there's also other instances of CPS. Like I mentioned earlier, a creator who does a lot of live streaming, and there's nothing wrong with live streaming, but she even went to the extent to live stream the actual removal taking place. If you're curious what that can look like for workers, you can go watch you can find it re-uploaded somewhere. I watched it from a re-upload because I believe the creator deleted it. And you can see some of the stuff that we deal with, and even that kind of behavior is even exhibited from the onset, even if you're not removing. Some people are just very abrasive. There's other instances. I know this is a little bit older, and I was going to initially do a video about it, but real life gets in the way. Michael Weist came out with a video, which I will preface before I continue. He's not the most reliable or credible person to begin with. Okay, so if you watch Michael Weist's video about Danielle Cohn and you took it at face value, I will say he has a very shady and misrepresented history himself. He is not like the most credible person. So what he was saying, I took with a grain of salt. However, he does mention parts of what he saw. And of course, this is alleged. Based off of what he said, I'm going to say that what he witnessed is alleged because it's his word against hers. And again, he's not extremely credible. He was talking about some of the relationship between her and her mother that he observed. He also nonchalantly mentioned, he just had to nonchalantly mention that there have been 30 CPS reports, and, you know, that he thinks that the mom is engaging in not the best parenting. And I think he actually even alleges that her mom is abusive in this video. And Mr. Segway Man, right, from TanaCon. I remember him pushing that thing, being on that thing during those videos. Anyways, let me give a little bit of my opinion about the Danielle Cohn stuff. Do I see concerns? Yes, I do. However, you have to actually also identify that she is an older teen now. She's 15 or 16, and I understand that these behaviors have been ongoing. So do I see where the concern is? Absolutely, I see it too. However, you also have to try and visualize things from the aspect of her being an unruly teen. And I know not a lot of people think of this unless you've dealt with an unruly teen yourself as a parent, or someone in your family was unruly. But that's where a lot of, I try to view things from all points of view, because I have investigated situations similar to this that have been because of a lack of parenting and supervision. But I've also seen the total reverse, where it has not been at the fault of the parents at all. And it is all because the child is unruly, disruptive, and wanting to engage in these behaviors. Yes, parents have some kind of control to a degree, but not the control that people try to put out on the internet when talking about Danielle Cohn. About her tattoos, I know people have issues with her tattoos. Listen, if she's going to a state where she can have parental consent and her parents are consenting, or a parent is consenting, I mean, that state's not doing anything wrong. Can you question the morality and the ethics of it? Absolutely. Is it a potential that she'll regret those when she's older? Potentially. I mean, I have a tattoo that I don't talk about that I regret, but I mean, those are choices that I've made, and I deal with it. I mean, it is what it is. So yeah, that part sucks. And I get where people's concerns are with that. I get people's concerns about the provocative situations that she puts herself in. And I have addressed before, when she was younger, I do believe that the mother was maybe encouraging these things for online clout. Is that poor choices to make for your child? Absolutely. Could that beg to question some of her other parenting choices? 100%. But at the end of the day, at this point, she's 15, 16 years old. If she wants to wear a bikini on her Instagram, there's not very much her mother can do about that. So, I mean, I understand people's outrage, but at the same time, you really do need to be willing to look at the other side of the coin. And mentioning that exactly, you can't do anything if a parent gives consent, even if it's only one parent. You can't do anything about that. And that's not on the tattoo parlor's back if that happened. If they did what they were legally bound to do in their state of work, they didn't do anything wrong. Again, can you question maybe the morality and the ethics of it? You can, but if they're following the state laws, you can't damn them for doing their fucking job. Like that breaches into territory that I do not agree with either. So when it comes to her, it is very touchy. There are situations and aspects that we know as a public that, yes, I do think cause for question and concern. However, when Michael Weiss made the comment that there's been 30 reports, some people hear that and they're like, oh my fucking God, there's been 30 reports. Oh my God. Okay, she's a public figure, and you have channels who incite their audiences to call CPS on her and her mom. One, you shouldn't be doing that. Clearly, you need to educate yourself about what CPS is, because you're clogging up the system. Like, Katie wants to talk about, and these are not really related, but Katie and other creators want to talk about how sending the workers out to them one time is an overuse of the system and using of resources. Calling on Danielle Cohn excess of 30 times and then inciting your audience on top of that to call is highly irresponsible, especially when you claim you don't know how CPS works and then you incite everybody to call. It's really irresponsible, and that is a waste of resources. I'm just going to say that. But where I come from is if there have been 30 reports and nothing has been done, there is not enough information for the state to do anything. And Danielle is verbal and she is pretty intelligent. Yes, has she grown up and has the maturity level of a teenager, but has grown up quicker than that because of her online presence? Yes, she has, but she is verbal. Can she lie to a worker? Yeah, she could. But when CPS investigates, they typically talk to more than just the family. In Florida, we had to talk to a minimum of 2, if not 3 people outside of the family unit to make sure that there weren't concerns. And again, I don't know how California CPS operates. Maybe they don't have those rules, but if she is verbal and she is being interviewed by CPS, she has the ability that if she is in an unsafe situation or feels unsafe, she would address it. Some of the comments I have seen Danielle make in reference to her mom, to me, comes off that she is more of an unruly teen who just doesn't listen to her mom. And even comments her mom has made also makes me think, like in this video that Michael Weiss does, he shares a clip of this alleged documentary he was making where the mom says Danielle's going to do what Danielle wants to do. That is very much a statement that a mother may make if they have tried to parent, but the child refuses. And the reality is, in the world today, with so much exposure to social media, kids will do what they want to do. No matter how old or how young, they're going to do what they want to do. You can do only so much as a parent to protect them and to restrict them. But Danielle was being pushed into this influencer lifestyle. Do I think that was maybe appropriate of her mom to do? No, but it doesn't mean that she was trying to harm her child. So I that's something that I kind of wanted to talk about, and I just never got to it. So I figured during this conversation, I could talk about it since CPS is mentioned and stuff like that, and kind of explain where I sit and how I view that situation. I'm really parched. Yeah, not another housewife. That's the one thing I don't want to talk about. I addressed that when I was in newer channel. I don't want to touch that aspect of it, but I know what you mean. How many regular people have thousands following their every move and considering? Well, what's interesting about this world, and I mean, they're two very different individuals because they're their own people. But even look at the D'Amelio sisters. And when you look at Charlie and everything that's kind of been coming out from her rapid success, how stressed and anxiety riddled she is to where she's having panic attacks. I mean, I can't assume, we can all just assume that Danielle has felt that same pressure too. And maybe Danielle is just acting out differently than how Charlie does. I mean, we're only privy to what is shared online. And we have to also have that acknowledgement that we only see what these people want us to see. And same thing with family vloggers, until you make a mistake like Jordan Cheyenne and forget to delete you being a shitty mother to your son, forcing him to be emotional for a thumbnail. I mean, those are the reasons why Paisley, I don't know if you can hear her whining. Those are the reasons why I personally have questions about family vloggers. I hit a huge gray area, and I'm probably going to do a video, if not this week, next week, kind of talking about my opinion of family vloggers and where the line draws for me, because it does draw in different spots depending on the situation and the scenario. I don't think every family vlogger is bad, and I don't think every family vlogger is good and has good intentions. But it's situations like that we found out with Jordan and Cheyenne on why I have always kind of had concerns about family vloggers is the point to where they start to exploit their kids. I think you can have your children online and you not be exploiting them. Forcing your children to film or forcing them to do certain things or be in certain situations or pose for certain stuff, you are 100% taking advantage of your child at that point. And that's when it falls into exploitation. And that's where I start to have issues with family vloggers. I think if you're just casually vlogging and compiling your week of vlogs of hanging out with your kids, and it's clearly like not centered around what your child is doing. Yeah, they're passing by or they're a part of the content, but it's not the sole focus. They're not specifically talking to the camera because they've been coached to talk to the camera about a certain thing, that I don't think that that's inherently wrong. And I don't think you're inherently exploiting your kids doing that. But when you're forcing your kids to excessively film, that's all they know. They don't know any different. They grow up in this world of having to pretend they're happy or having to do like these skits for these videos, talk about inappropriate situations, these teenage girls being told that they have to go underwear shopping. Stuff like that is crossing the line and inappropriate. But like I said, I do think that there's a gray line for me. She made a video stating her mother didn't force her to do anything. I don't necessarily agree with that, because when she's 15 or 16 now, I can't remember how old she just turned. She's been on social media for several years. So when she was 10, 11, 12, I'm sorry, I find at that age, it's hard to believe that she was wanting to like flaunt her figure off and pose in these provocative positions. I don't find that very believable. When you hit the ages of 13 and a half, 14, 15, I can be more believed of it happening at those ages than like 10, 11, 12. Like, you're so underdeveloped at that point. And I don't mean physically, I just mean mentally. You're so underdeveloped at that point. You may just, from my experience, like I didn't start getting interested in boys or anything like that until I was like 11. And I do know in society now where everything is like hypersexualized and things like that, this generation is growing up differently and maybe exposed to that kind of stuff a little bit more. I still just find that hard to believe that she wanted to pose herself at those ages that early on. So that's where I can understand and agree with the concerns of her maybe being led, or, and I don't necessarily want to say forced, but encouraged to have this online presence. Yeah, the Jordan Cheyenne stuff was a mess. I mean, didn't she, the last I knew and the last I heard, she deleted her channel. So I don't know if that's still a thing from like all the pushback and blowback. It really didn't bode in her favor, which, I mean, she chose to cancel herself at this point. Yeah, she was getting heavy backlash. Yeah, she was getting heavy criticism. What I find interesting is she was saying she wanted to be held accountable and she was sorry. If you really wanted to be held accountable, learn, grow from it, and move on, you wouldn't have done a cowardly move such as delete all of your social medias. Like, I get it probably got hard for her to deal with the backlash, and I'm sure she got some unsolicited and probably even unwarranted hate. But that's when you, in my opinion, when you go through something like that as a creator or an influencer, you should probably have somebody you trust in your life to go through your social medias for you not being the one to check all of the messages and stuff like that until it dies down, because the reality is it eventually will die down. Is it going to take some time? Most likely, because it was such a horrific thing. I think a lot of people really who may say they have issues with family vloggers really never discussed that aspect of why they may have had the issue. And I think the other part is people probably felt uncomfortable about family channels, but didn't really know why they were feeling uncomfortable. And then seeing this video play out, or this clip play out, gave the click in their head on, this is probably why I was uncomfortable, because subconsciously I knew something like this was going on with these kids. And that's an uncomfortable thought to have. So I think what she's done, like, I understand her doing it for her own sake, but she could have logged off of social media, had someone else checking it for her if it had to be checked, and continued to upload the content that she planned on uploading. But her just deleting everything and trying to act like this never happened and erase her existence, like, that clip has been recorded so many times and has been re-uploaded so many times at this point. Like, you're not going to get to run away from it. If she was honest in her interview with DCP, saying she wanted to be held accountable and she wanted to move on from it, she wouldn't have taken this route to delete everything. That's just my opinion. A lot of mommy vloggers just show their kids in their natural state. I think some family channels probably do. And family channels and mommy vloggers get this bad hype around them because of the larger family channels that do engage in this problematic behavior, like the Ace family. I see people talking about the LeBrants. I've never watched them or known enough about them to really gather an opinion. 8 Passengers. What's another large family channel that I see talked about quite a bit? I mean, the Stoffers, that whole situation. I mean, there are family channels with massive platforms that engage in these bad behaviors. And unfortunately, it ends up being a thing where it just gets blanketed across the entire genre and niche, because these select few are engaging in this bad behavior so outwardly so that it's just assumed that all channels engage in that behavior. And that's not fair to do, but unfortunately in the judgmental society that we live in today, it happens anyways. I also worry that running around telling kids that they've been exploited, if maybe they haven't, is dangerous and damaging. Yeah, it definitely can be, Melissa. I can understand that viewpoint. Alrighty, so does anybody have any other questions in relation to CPS, or maybe a hypothetical question or anything related to our topic at hand? I'm going to give it just a little bit for people to maybe ask those questions, and then I am going to go ahead and wrap this up and hop off. I do appreciate everybody for being here and having the conversation and asking questions. And if you did leave a question during the live chat and I happen to not see it, you can either reach out to me privately or you can leave it in the comments afterwards. And over the next couple of days, I will be checking my comments to make sure I'm responding to any questions that are there. Removing a teenager can be, yeah, I mean, that's just the reality of it. When it comes to teenagers, no matter where you're at, I think it's, from my experience working in the field, it is very hard to show that it's all on the parents and not partially on the child. And I know that doesn't make a lot of sense, but it is extremely hard the older children get. And I mean, I'm talking like 14, 15 plus, it does become very hard to gather enough supporting evidence and information because those children are not as vulnerable just based off of the age alone. They're not as vulnerable as an 8-9-year-old or, younger. So it does become a very tough and sticky situation. Is it impossible? No, I've removed teenagers before, but it is a lot harder to support a removal of a teenager. So, Angel, I'm not going to read your comment out just because I don't want to read the specifics of your comment. But to answer it, even if CPS is called, like I said, it doesn't always necessarily mean an investigation is going to be launched. It may not reach the criteria for that state or that agency to warrant an investigation. And that could be why. It could also be just that you guys aren't aware investigations have happened. Just because reports are made, as investigators, like you don't have to contact the reporter. And even if you do contact the reporter, you can't give out any information. The only thing you can do as an investigator when talking to outside sources is gather information and ask the appropriate questions, but you can't divulge any information because it's confidential and it's against the law. Do you think it would be better if all states and counties had the same standards and protocols for CPS? It probably would be, but that would be an extremely hard feat. And I've said before, and I haven't said in this stream, CPS has come a long way. And I know when I do these streams, often one of the comments that is left is like, I'm advocating for CPS. I am just trying to educate people about CPS and about how it was when I was working. It's not lost on me that there are agencies like CPS or even labeled CPS that tend to be corrupt. That's not lost on me. I know that exists. That was not my experience. Also, from my profession, like my personal experience in the system in Florida, was horrendous. I had a terrible experience in the system, which is why I became a social worker to get into child protection, was so a child wouldn't get lost in the system like I did, and that a child wouldn't be left in situations like I was. It's almost like me fighting for myself, my past self. When I do investigations, I put my all into it. And do I know that not every investigator operates like that? 100%. But these are more so we can just have conversations, so I can give a little bit of my knowledge and experience for people who have questions about it, or when situations regarding CPS happen online. Because what does happen, and what I have seen happen with this Katie instance, is people think they know how the system operates and they just speak it into existence when they're not necessarily correct. And it's because people don't know how the system operates. And I understand a lot of reasons why people don't understand how it operates is because it is such a confidential, unless you have had personal interactions with CPS, you don't know the process. And even if you have had personal interaction with CPS, if it was dated, systems and agencies change and progress over time. Like Florida's changed and progressed over time. Is it still exactly where it should be? No, it's not. Every CPS system could probably always use some refining, new laws, new education, and things like that being done, if that makes sense. I wish CPS could be more of a service you can self-refer. You can in most states. In most states, you can. In situations like, not it gets really hard to explain. But if you have an unruly teenager, let's just go with that you can't control, that is doing drugs, is engaging in really unsavory behavior, and you've done everything you can as a parent to try and protect them and keep them from engaging in that behavior, you can do a self-report and call the hotline and tell them that you need assistance. If you're struggling with like just needing resources, you can call and they will direct you to the appropriate agency to get assistance. If anybody ever needs any kind of assistance in the States, you can always dial *211, which is the phone number to United Way. They're going to ask you basic information of where you're at and what services you're looking for, and they will provide those to you. Some creators will claim CPS took multiple kids over stained clothing. I mean, I find it hard to believe that CPS would remove children due to dirty clothes and that a judge will uphold a removal like that. There's likely more information that they are excluding or omitting. And if they're a public figure, probably because they don't want their reputation damaged. But it's not an easy feat to do a removal. A lot goes into actually removing a child from their home. So I find that a little bit hard to believe. And also, being in poverty is not held against you. We would get cases when I was working, I would get cases that understand why the person calling may have a concern if a child seems dirty, or if they wear the same clothes over and over and they have a concern that maybe the child is being neglected. That doesn't mean like the person's report is genuine and wondering if the child is being neglected because of these things. But it could very well be an instance where the family is just in poverty and can't afford clothes, and the kid does get bathed, but they don't stay clean because kids are kids. I've worked plenty of cases like that. So it would take quite a bit to convince me that a child or children would be removed just because their kids were dirty. Yeah, I've worked cases where children have called on their parents before too. It does happen. I have also worked situations, it's called a parental referral. It's not so much an investigation, where parents are asking for that assistance. Exactly, Jamie. I'm sure you get a lot of that. Alrighty, I think I've gotten to all of the questions that are here. I'll give it just a little bit longer, just in case anybody left any that I missed. And then I'm going to hop off of here, let my dogs out, feed my dogs, and then Xylee is going live in a little less than 30 minutes. So I will be moderating her chat. So I've got to get off of here in the next couple of minutes to make sure I can accomplish all of those things and get back in my seat. You mean someone may have called and filed a report, but that doesn't mean it was investigated. Exactly. That's where I'm talking about criteria. Somebody can call in a report, and if it doesn't rise to that agency's criteria for an investigation isn't going to occur. And like I stated, and I didn't give specifics because I'm weird about giving specifics, but I worked a case that I'm not going to say the children's ages, but there were two children, and they were verbal but young, and they had a single dad. This single dad he couldn't test clean. He was known to be a methamphetamine user. He had a lot of recent charges criminally of possession. So I knew this was a concern. Talking to the kids, they disclosed concerns. And what this dad did, because he knew I was gathering information that was highly concerning, he up and left my state. And when he did that, I found out where he was, and I called in a report to that state, and I told them all of my concerns. And I honestly was working towards gathering information for a removal. That's how concerned I was. And the state didn't even screen it in. They didn't have a concern. So, I mean, that goes to show like different states operate differently, and what qualifies as concerning to one state won't be concerning to another state. It all depends on their criteria and what rises to the level that they think an investigation should be done. Yeah, you want more grandparents' rights. CPS isn't the one who isn't the agency that has grandparents' rights. That's based off of your state. Florida didn't have grandparents' rights either. So anytime removals would happen and you're trying to keep the children with family, what people don't realize is we try our best to keep, like, agencies try their best to keep kids within the family, but you have to pass the same forms that foster homes pass. It's called a home study. They are extremely lengthy and extremely intrusive and go over absolutely everything. And if you have anything in your criminal history that is recent enough, or in your own DCF history that is a concern for why the child's being removed, you're not going to get placement, at least not in Florida. So even in situations like that, it can be hard to actually find familial or friends for placement, because it is a lengthy and pretty strenuous process to go through. It can get done in a day, but it a lot is entailed, and some people don't want to go through the hassle of that. Some people don't want to be open. And then there's some situations where the families just don't qualify for either their criminal or their own DCF history. I don't know why states don't have more grandparent rights. I really don't. It's a state by state thing. I think it just depends on whoever is in legislature and whoever's at the higher tier of your DCF agencies that are trying to push for laws to be made. If they're not pushing for those kinds of laws, it's something that is very easily overlooked. Yeah, kinship is very much the same thing as placement. Some states still call it kinship and some states don't. In Florida, we didn't call it kinship. Alrighty, guys. So I don't see any other questions. I am going to go ahead and hop off of here. But again, if you had a question, I didn't answer it, or you watched this in replay or whatever it may be, and you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me or leave it in the comment section, and I will try my best to keep up with it and answer you guys. But I am running low on time, and I've got dogs that need to go out and eat dinner. So I appreciate you guys. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you, everyone, for being respectful and understanding and not being over the top, especially about such sensitive topics. But I hope you guys all have a good day, evening, or night.